The lunch bell rang through Lincoln High School, and students rushed toward the cafeteria like water flowing downhill. Among the crowd of teenagers laughing and shouting to their friends, one girl moved differently. She walked slowly, her head down, staying close to the walls as if trying to become part of them. Her name was Maya Chen, and at 17, she had become an expert at being invisible. While other students gathered in groups around tables, sharing stories about their weekend plans and complaining about homework, Maya found her usual spot in the far corner of the cafeteria. The table was old and scratched, with gum stuck underneath and initials carved into the surface by students from years past. Nobody else ever sat there. It was perfect for someone who didn't want to be noticed. Maya unwrapped her sandwich carefully. Peanut butter and jelly again. The bread was a day old from the discount rack at the grocery store, but it was food and she was grateful for it. She had learned not to take anything for granted. Around her, the cafeteria buzzed with teenage energy. Girls talked about the latest drama in their friend groups. Boys argued about sports teams and video games. Everyone seemed to belong somewhere, to have their place in the complicated social world of high school. But Maya sat alone, eating her sandwich and listening to the conversations that flowed around her like music she couldn't join. It wasn't that she didn't want friends. Sometimes late at night when she couldn't sleep, she would imagine what it would be like to have someone to text, someone to sit with at lunch, someone who might invite her to hang out after school. But wanting something and being able to have it were two very different things. Maya had learned to be invisible because being seen meant questions she couldn't answer. Where do you live? What do your parents do? Why don't you ever go to school events? Why are your clothes always the same few outfits? Why do you always look so tired? The questions would come, just like they always did when someone got too close. And Maya had no good answers that wouldn't reveal the truth about her life, so she kept her head down and stayed quiet. In her classes, teachers knew her as the student who always turned in her homework on time, but never raised her hand. She sat in the middle rows, not in the front where the eager students competed for attention, and not in the back where the troublemakers caused disruptions. She was right in the middle, perfectly positioned to blend in and disappear. Her grades were good, but not so good that teachers would call attention to her achievements. She had learned to walk the careful line between success and invisibility. Getting noticed for being too smart was just as dangerous as getting noticed for falling behind. Maya finished her sandwich and looked around the cafeteria. At a nearby table, a group of girls was planning someone's birthday party. They talked excitedly about decorations and music and who they would invite. For just a moment, Maya let herself imagine what it would be like to be included in plans like that, to have people who cared about celebrating her special day. But her birthday had passed 2 months ago and nobody at school even knew. She had spent it taking care of her little brother while her grandmother worked late. Just like most other days. The reality was that Maya couldn't afford to have friends because friendship required honesty, and honesty was a luxury she couldn't afford. At home, she was responsible for things that most teenagers never had to think about. She was the one who made sure there was food in the refrigerator and that bills got paid on time. She was the one who attended parent-teacher conferences and signed permission slips. She was the one who held everything together when the adults in her life couldn't. But here at school, she had to pretend to be just another normal teenager with normal teenage problems. The weight of living two different lives pressed down on her shoulders every day. Sometimes she felt like she was carrying a backpack full of rocks that nobody else could see. The effort of keeping up the pretense, of hiding the truth about her real life, left her exhausted before each day even began. Maya's clothes told a story she didn't want anyone to read. The same 3 pairs of jeans rotated throughout the week, the sweaters with small holes that she hoped nobody would notice, the shoes that had been resold twice because buying new ones wasn't an option. She had become skilled at making old things look presentable. She knew how to wash clothes so they would last longer, how to remove stains with household items, how to fix small tears with careful stitching. These were skills that most of her classmates would never need. Skills learned out of necessity rather than choice. The other students at Lincoln High worried about things like getting the latest phone or having the right brand of sneakers. Maya worried about whether there would be enough money for groceries this week and whether her brother was eating lunch at his elementary school. Their worlds were so different that sometimes Maya felt like she was from another planet entirely. As the lunch period continued, Maya watched her classmates and wondered what their lives were like outside of school. Did they go home to families who asked about their day? Did they have bedrooms of their own, decorated with posters and photos of friends? Did their biggest concern really revolve around weekend plans and social media drama? She tried not to feel bitter about the differences. Everyone had their own struggles, she told herself. Just because someone's problems looked smaller from the outside didn't mean they weren't real to them, but sometimes, in moments like this, sitting alone in a crowded room full of people her own age, the loneliness felt overwhelming. Maya had built walls around herself so high that sometimes she wondered if she remembered how to let people in, even if she wanted to. The habits of hiding, of protecting herself and her family's secrets, had become so automatic that she wasn't sure she knew how to be any other way. The lunch bell rang again, signaling that it was time to return to class. Maya gathered her things slowly, letting the crowd thin out before she stood up. She had learned that moving with the crowd meant more chances for accidental contact, for someone to notice her, for unwanted attention. As she walked toward her locker, Maya caught her reflection in the glass of a trophy case. The girl looking back at her seemed small and tired, older than her 17 years. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her brown eyes held a wariness that didn't belong on a teenager's face. She looked away quickly and continued walking. In 15 minutes, she would be sitting in her next class, surrounded by 30 other students, invisible once again. It was safer this way, she told herself. Being invisible meant being protected. It meant that her carefully constructed world wouldn't fall apart under the weight of questions she couldn't answer and truths she couldn't tell. But deep down, in a part of herself that she tried not to acknowledge, Maya wondered what it would feel like to be seen, really seen for who she truly was. Not the problems she carried or the secrets she kept, but the person underneath all of that. She wondered, but she didn't dare hope. Hope, she had learned, was another luxury she couldn't afford. The alarm clock buzzed at 5 a.m., cutting through the darkness of Maya's small bedroom. She reached over quickly to turn it off, hoping the sound hadn't woken her little brother Kai, who slept on a mattress on the floor beside her bed. In the dim light filtering through their thin curtains, she could see his small form curled under a blanket, still fast asleep. Maya sat up carefully, her body protesting the early hour. She had stayed up until midnight the night before, helping Kai with his math homework and then finishing her own assignments by the light of a desk lamp. Sleep was something she grabbed in small pieces, never enough to feel truly rested. She tiptoed out of their shared bedroom and into the small kitchen of their apartment. The refrigerator hummed loudly, a sound she had grown used to over the years. Inside, she found eggs, bread, and a small container of orange juice. Enough for breakfast for Kai and herself. While the eggs cooked, Maya thought about the day ahead. Kai had a field trip to the local museum, which meant she needed to pack his lunch and make sure he had the permission slip she had signed the night before. At 7 years old, Kai was smart and curious, always asking questions about the world around him. Maya did her best to answer them, even when she didn't know the answers herself. Their grandmother worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table and rent paid. During the day, she cleaned offices downtown. In the evenings, she worked at a local diner, serving coffee and pie to customers who often left small tips. On weekends, she picked up extra shifts wherever she could find them. Maya's mother was a different story entirely. She lived with them sometimes, disappearing for days or weeks at a time when her addiction took control. When she was home, she slept most of the day and was unpredictable in the evenings. Maya had learned to take care of Kai during these times, to be both sister and parent when needed. Nobody at school knew any of this. As far as her teachers and classmates were concerned, Maya lived a normal teenage life with normal teenage concerns. She had become an expert at creating believable stories for every situation. When teachers asked about parent conferences, Maya explained that her mother worked nights and couldn't attend. When forms needed to be signed, she had practiced her mother's signature until it looked natural. When Kai's school called with questions, Maya answered the phone and spoke in a slightly deeper voice, pretending to be an adult. The lies came easily now, which sometimes scared her. She wondered if keeping so many secrets was changing who she was as a person, making her into someone she didn't recognize. After breakfast, Maya helped Kai get ready for school. She braided his hair carefully, making sure he looked neat and cared for. His clothes were clean and pressed, even if they were hand-me-downs from older kids in their building. Maya made sure that whatever struggles they faced at home, Kai would never look neglected at school. She packed his lunch in a brown paper bag, including a note with a smiley face that always made him laugh. These small gestures felt important to Maya. She wanted Kai to feel loved and supported, even when their family situation was complicated. Walking Kai to his elementary school had become part of Maya's morning routine. The school was only a few blocks from their apartment building, but Maya never let him walk alone. The neighborhood could be unpredictable, and she worried about him constantly. As they walked, Kai chattered about his upcoming field trip and the things he hoped to see at the museum. His excitement was infectious, and Maya found herself smiling despite her tiredness. These moments with Kai were some of the brightest parts of her day. After dropping him off, Maya walked to her own school. The transition from caring sister to invisible student happened gradually during the 15-minute walk. By the time she reached Lincoln High, she had mentally shifted into the role she played there. Her first class was English, where they were reading a novel about a family during the Great Depression. Maya found the story both fascinating and painful. The characters struggled with poverty and uncertainty, working multiple jobs to survive and keeping secrets from their neighbors about their financial situation. The similarities to her own life were uncomfortable. She wondered if her teacher had chosen this book intentionally, if somehow the woman suspected what Maya's home life was really like. But when she looked around the classroom, she saw her classmates discussing the characters as if they were from another world entirely, people whose problems were safely contained within the pages of a book. During lunch, Maya retreated to her usual corner table. She had brought a sandwich made from the bread and lunch meat that were on sale at the grocery store. While she ate, she mentally went through her after-school schedule. She needed to pick up Kai from his after-school program at 3:30. Then, they would stop by the library so he could work on a research project about animals while she helped him and did her own homework. After that, they would go home, where Maya would start dinner and help Kai with any assignments he had. Their grandmother wouldn't be home until after 10 p.m., which meant Maya was responsible for everything from homework help to bedtime stories. She had been doing this for so long that it felt natural, but sometimes she caught glimpses of other teenagers' lives and realized how different her experience was. In her afternoon history class, Maya's teacher announced that they would be having parent-teacher conferences the following week. Students needed to take home information packets for their families to schedule appointments. Maya accepted the packet with a neutral expression, but inside, her stomach tightened with familiar anxiety. She would need to call the school herself, using her disguised voice, and schedule an appointment. Then she would need to attend the conference alone, arriving a few minutes late and explaining that her mother had been delayed at work. These deceptions had become routine, but they never got easier. Each lie felt like another weight added to the invisible backpack she carried everywhere. After school, Maya collected Kai from his program and they walked to the library together. The children's section was bright and welcoming, with colorful displays and comfortable reading areas. Maya helped Kai find books about dolphins for his research project, then settled at a nearby table with her own schoolwork. While Kai read and took notes in his careful handwriting, Maya worked on a history essay about World War II. She found herself drawn to stories about people who had survived difficult circumstances, who had found ways to keep going when everything seemed hopeless. Sometimes Maya felt like she was living through her own kind of war, fighting daily battles that nobody else could see. The enemy wasn't soldiers or bombs, but poverty and instability, and the constant fear that someone would discover the truth about her family situation. As evening approached, Maya and Kai walked home through their neighborhood. The streets were busier now, with people returning from work and children playing outside apartment buildings. Maya kept Kai close to her side, always alert to their surroundings. Their apartment building was old and needed repairs, but it was home. Maya had learned to appreciate what they had, even when it wasn't much. They had a roof over their heads and food to eat, which was more than some families could say. That evening, after dinner and homework and getting Kai ready for bed, Maya sat at the small kitchen table with her own assignments. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic outside. She looked at her reflection in the dark window and saw a girl who looked older than her years. carrying responsibilities that most adults would find challenging. Sometimes she wondered what would happen if she just stopped, if she let someone else take care of everything for once. But then she thought about Kai sleeping peacefully in their bedroom, trusting that she would be there to take care of him tomorrow just like she had today. That trust was both a burden and a gift, something that gave her purpose even when everything else felt uncertain. Maya returned to her homework, working steadily through math problems and reading assignments. Tomorrow would bring another day of balancing her secret life with her school life. Another day of being invisible while carrying the weight of her family's world on her shoulders. She had become strong in ways that most teenagers never needed to be strong, but she had also become isolated in ways that sometimes felt overwhelming. Outside, the city continued its evening rhythm, full of people living their own complicated lives, carrying their own invisible burdens, finding their own ways to keep going despite the challenges they faced. Maya stared at the pink detention slip in her hand, feeling a mixture of embarrassment and frustration. She had fallen asleep during chemistry class again, her head nodding forward during Mr. Peterson's lecture about molecular bonds. The late nights of helping Kai with homework and managing household responsibilities were catching up with her. But she couldn't explain that to her teacher. Lunch detention. Room 237, Mr. Peterson had said quietly, handing her the slip after class. His expression wasn't angry, just concerned, which somehow made Maya feel worse. She nodded and took the slip, avoiding his eyes. Now, instead of eating her usual sandwich in the corner of the cafeteria, Maya found herself walking through the empty hallways toward room 237. The school felt different during lunch period, quieter and more echoing, with only the distant sounds of students in the cafeteria breaking the silence. Room 237 turned out to be empty when she arrived. Maya checked the number twice, thinking she might have made a mistake, but this was definitely the right place. She waited for a few minutes, expecting a teacher to show up and assign her some kind of work or lecture her about staying awake in class. But nobody came. After 15 minutes of sitting alone at a desk, Maya decided to explore. The hallways were still empty, and she found herself wandering aimlessly, grateful for a few minutes where she didn't have to think about homework or household responsibilities or keeping up her careful act of normalcy. She walked past empty classrooms and bulletin boards covered with student artwork and announcements for clubs she would never join. The school felt like a different place when it was quiet, less overwhelming and chaotic. That's when she heard it, or rather, didn't hear it. Most of the school was filled with the distant buzz of conversation from the cafeteria, but one hallway seemed particularly quiet. Maya followed the silence, curious about where it led. At the end of the hallway, she found a door marked Music Room. The sign was old and slightly crooked, as if it had been there for many years. Maya had never been in this part of the school before, had never even realized there was a music program. She tried the door handle, expecting it to be locked, but it turned easily. The room beyond was larger than she had expected, with rows of empty chairs facing a small stage area. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, creating patterns on the worn wooden floor. But what caught Maya's attention was the piano. It sat in the corner of the room like a forgotten piece of furniture, an old upright piano with keys that had yellowed with age. The bench in front of it was slightly crooked, and Maya could see dust motes dancing in the sunbeam that fell across the keyboard. She had never played a musical instrument in her life. Music lessons were expensive, and her family had never had money for anything beyond basic necessities. But something about the piano drew her forward, step by careful step, until she was standing right in front of it. Maya looked around the room one more time to make sure she was still alone, then sat down on the bench. The keys felt cool under her fingertips when she touched them lightly, not pressing hard enough to make any sound. She had heard piano music before, of course, sometimes on the radio or in movies, brief pieces that made her pause and listen. There was something about the sound that felt familiar, even though she had never played. Tentatively, Maya pressed down on one key. The note that came out was clear and simple, hanging in the air for a moment before fading away. She pressed another key, then another, listening to how each note sounded different but somehow connected to the others. Without really planning to, Maya began pressing keys in patterns, seeing how different combinations sounded together. Some notes seemed to clash when played at the same time. while others blended together like they belonged together. She had no idea what she was doing. No knowledge of music theory or proper finger positions or any of the technical things that real piano players probably knew. But her hands seemed to find their own way across the keys, creating simple melodies that surprised her with their clarity. The first song that emerged from her exploration was sad and slow, matching the loneliness she carried with her every day. Maya didn't realize she was crying until she felt tears on her cheeks, but she didn't stop playing. The music seemed to be expressing feelings she had kept locked inside for so long that she had almost forgotten they existed. Then she tried something different, pressing keys in a pattern that was lighter and more hopeful. This melody reminded her of the way Kai laughed when she told him funny stories, or the feeling of walking home on a sunny day when everything seemed possible. For 20 minutes, Maya lost herself completely in the music. She forgot about her chemistry detention, forgot about her responsibilities waiting at home, forgot about the careful, invisible act she performed every day at school. There was only the piano and the melodies that seemed to flow naturally from her hands. The notes she played weren't perfect. Some combinations sounded awkward, and sometimes her timing was off. But there was something magical happening that Maya had never experienced before. For the first time in years, she felt like she was truly expressing herself, creating something beautiful in a world that often felt harsh and complicated. She played melodies that told the story of her early mornings with Kai, the way he trusted her to take care of him even when she felt too young for such responsibility. She played songs about her grandmother's tired hands and kind eyes, about the way the older woman worked so hard to keep their family together. She even played music about her mother, sad and complicated melodies that captured both love and disappointment, hope and frustration. These were feelings Maya had never been able to talk about with anyone, but somehow the piano keys understood them. The music room's acoustics made every note sound rich and full, as if the room itself was designed to make music sound beautiful. Maya found herself experimenting with dynamics, playing some notes softly and others with more force, discovering how different touches created different emotions in the music. She was so absorbed in her playing that she didn't notice how much time had passed until she heard the distant sound of the lunch bell ringing. Students would be returning to class soon, and she needed to get back to her normal routine. Maya lifted her hands from the keys reluctantly, listening as the final note faded away into silence. The room felt different now, charged with the energy of the music she had created. She looked down at her hands, amazed that they had been capable of producing such beautiful sounds. As she stood up from the piano bench, Maya felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time. Pure joy. Not the temporary happiness that came from small victories or brief moments of peace, but a deep, surprising joy that seemed to come from somewhere inside herself that she had forgotten existed. She looked back at the piano one more time before leaving the room, already wondering when she might be able to return. The thought of going back to her regular classes, of putting on her invisible mask and pretending to be just another ordinary student, felt harder now that she had discovered this secret part of herself. Walking back through the empty hallways, Maya felt like she was carrying a wonderful secret. Not the heavy, burdensome secrets of her family situation, but something light and hopeful. She had found something that belonged entirely to her, something that nobody could take away or complicate with questions and expectations. For the rest of the day, Maya moved through her classes in a daze of wonder. She kept thinking about the feeling of the keys under her fingers, the way melodies had seemed to appear from nowhere, the sense of expressing emotions she had never been able to put into words. During her last class of the day, while her teacher droned on about algebraic equations, Maya found herself tapping out silent melodies on her desk, her fingers remembering the patterns they had discovered on the piano keys. She had stumbled onto something extraordinary during what was supposed to be a punishment, and already she was planning how she might find her way back to that music room tomorrow. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Maya was looking forward to lunch period. The next day, Maya could barely concentrate on her morning classes. Her mind kept drifting back to the piano, to the feeling of creating music with her own hands. She found herself tapping rhythms on her desk, humming melodies under her breath that she didn't even realize she was making. When the lunch bell finally rang, Maya felt her heart speed up with anticipation. Instead of heading to the cafeteria with the other students, she slipped away toward the music room, moving carefully through the hallways to avoid drawing attention. The music room was empty again, just as she had hoped. Maya closed the door softly behind her and walked straight to the piano, sitting down on the bench like she was greeting an old friend. This time, she wasn't hesitant. Her hands found the keys immediately, beginning to explore where she had left off the day before. The melodies came easier now, flowing more naturally as her fingers grew more comfortable with the instrument. Maya spent every lunch period for the next week in the music room, and each day brought new discoveries. She learned which keys sounded good together and which ones created tension that needed to be resolved. She discovered that playing the same melody in different octaves could completely change its emotional impact. Without any formal training, Maya began to develop her own style of playing. She favored minor keys that matched the complexity of her emotions, but she also learned to create moments of brightness that felt like hope breaking through clouds. Her playing was intuitive rather than technical. She didn't know the names of the chords she was using or the formal rules of composition, but her ear guided her toward combinations that sounded right. The music she created was raw and honest, full of the feelings she had been carrying alone for so long. During one lunch session, Maya found herself playing a melody that reminded her of her grandmother's lullabies. When she was very young, before their family situation became so complicated, her grandmother used to sing to her in Spanish while braiding her hair. Maya had forgotten those songs over the years, but her hands seemed to remember them, translating the melodies into piano music that brought back memories of feeling safe and loved. Another day, she created music that captured the feeling of walking through their neighborhood at dusk, when the streetlights were just beginning to flicker on and families were calling their children inside for dinner. The melody was bittersweet, acknowledging both the beauty and the challenges of her community. Maya's favorite discovery was learning to play with dynamics. She found that whispering a melody with very soft touches could be just as powerful as playing with full force. Some of her most emotional pieces were the quietest ones, requiring listeners to lean in and pay attention to hear the subtle beauty. As her daily sessions continued, Maya began to notice changes in herself outside of the music room. She felt less weighed down by her responsibilities, more capable of handling the challenges that came up each day. The music was giving her a way to process her emotions instead of just carrying them around like heavy baggage. She also started hearing music everywhere. The rhythm of her footsteps walking to school became percussion in her mind. The sound of rain against the windows turned into melodies she would try to recreate on the piano the next day. Even conversations in the hallway had musical qualities she had never noticed before. At home, Maya found herself humming while she helped Kai with his homework or prepared dinner. Kai noticed the change right away, commenting that she seemed happier, more relaxed. Maya couldn't explain about the piano without revealing her secret, so she just smiled and told him she was having good days at school. The truth was that music was becoming the best part of her day, the thing that gave her energy to handle everything else. She looked forward to lunch period with an excitement she had never felt about anything school-related before. Maya's playing grew more sophisticated as the weeks passed. She learned to create conversation between her right and left hands, with one playing melody while the other provided harmony or rhythm. She discovered the power of silence, learning that pauses in the music could be just as important as the notes themselves. One day, she experimented with playing music that told stories. She created a piece about Kai's morning routine, starting with gentle notes that represented him sleeping, building to playful melodies as he woke up and got ready for school. The music captured his curiosity and energy, his questions about everything from why the sky was blue to how airplanes stayed in the air. Another composition was inspired by her grandmother's hands, which showed the evidence of years of hard work, but were still gentle when they braided Maya's hair or checked Kai's forehead for fever. The melody was steady and strong, with underlying tenderness that spoke of unconditional love. Maya even wrote music about her mother, though these pieces were the most difficult to play. The melodies were complex and sometimes discordant, reflecting the complicated emotions of loving someone who wasn't always capable of love in return. These songs helped Maya process feelings she had never been able to discuss with anyone. As her skills developed, Maya began to understand that she had stumbled onto something special. The music she was creating wasn't just noise or random notes, it was real composition, expressing emotions and ideas with a sophistication that surprised even her. She started to recognize patterns in her playing, recurring themes and chord progressions that felt natural to her. Without knowing it, she was developing her own musical voice, creating a style that was entirely her own. The piano itself seemed to respond to her growing confidence. Notes that had sounded stiff and uncertain in her early sessions now flowed smoothly under her fingers. She learned to use the pedals to sustain notes and create richer harmonies. Even though nobody had taught her how, Maya's lunch periods became sacred time, 30 minutes each day when she could be completely herself, without worrying about maintaining the careful image she presented to the rest of the world. In the music room, she didn't have to be the responsible older sister, or the invisible student, or the girl with too many secrets. She could just be Maya, creating beauty with her hands and expressing her heart through melodies that nobody else had ever heard. Sometimes she wondered what would happen if someone discovered her secret. Would they think she was skipping lunch to cause trouble? Would they ask questions about why she wasn't with friends? Why she preferred to spend time alone with an old piano? But those worries faded as soon as she started playing. The music demanded all of her attention, pulling her into a world where only melody and harmony mattered, where her emotions could be expressed honestly without fear of judgment or consequences. By the end of her first month of daily piano sessions, Maya had created a collection of original compositions that told the story of her life in ways that words never could. Each piece was a chapter in her ongoing story, capturing moments of sadness and joy, struggle and hope, loneliness and love. She had found her voice not through speaking but through music, and it was more powerful than anything she had ever imagined possible. It was a Thursday afternoon when everything changed. The rain had been falling steadily since morning, creating a gray, somber atmosphere that matched the piece Maya was working on during her lunch session. She had been coming to the music room for almost 3 months now, and her playing had grown remarkably sophisticated. The composition she was developing that day was perhaps her most personal yet. It began with soft, melancholy notes that represented the feeling of waiting for someone who might never come home. The melody captured the specific sadness of watching her mother disappear into addiction, the way love could coexist with disappointment and worry. Maya's fingers moved across the keys with growing confidence, building the piece from whispered beginnings to more complex harmonies. She had learned to use silence as part of the music, creating pauses that made the returning notes more meaningful. The rain against the windows provided a natural backdrop, adding another layer to the emotional atmosphere she was creating. As the piece progressed, Maya poured months of unspoken feelings into the music. The melody spoke of the nights she lay awake wondering if her mother was safe, of the mornings when she checked the couch hoping to find her there, sleeping peacefully. It captured the complex emotions of being angry at someone, while simultaneously missing them desperately. The middle section of the composition grew more turbulent, with clashing chords that represented the chaos addiction brought into their lives. Maya's left hand played a steady, repetitive pattern that symbolized her own efforts to maintain stability for Kai, while her right hand wove unpredictable melodies above it, showing how their mother's presence could never be counted on. But then, as Maya always tried to do in her music, she found a way to end with hope. The final section of the piece returned to the opening melody, but with subtle changes that suggested acceptance and resilience. The notes acknowledged pain without being consumed by it, finding beauty even in difficult circumstances. Maya was so absorbed in her playing that she didn't hear the music room door open. She was lost in the emotional world she was creating. Her eyes closed as her hands found their way across the familiar keys. The rain, the music, and her own breathing were the only sounds in her universe. Mrs. Rodriguez had been teaching music at Lincoln High School for 15 years. She had heard thousands of students play piano, from beginners struggling with simple scales to advanced students preparing for college auditions. But the music coming from her classroom during lunch period was unlike anything she had encountered. She had come to the music room to retrieve some sheet music she needed for her afternoon classes, expecting to find the room empty as usual. Instead, she found a teenage girl playing an original composition with a level of emotional depth and technical intuition that took Mrs. Rodriguez's breath away. The teacher stood frozen in the doorway, afraid to move or make any sound that might interrupt what she was hearing. The music was sophisticated and deeply personal, demonstrating an understanding of harmony and emotional expression that typically took years of formal training to develop. But it wasn't just the technical aspects that amazed. Mrs. Rodriguez. The music told a story, painted pictures with sound, conveyed emotions with a clarity that was both heartbreaking and beautiful. Whoever this student was, she had a rare gift for musical communication. Mrs. Rodriguez recognized the girl from school but had never had her in class. She was one of those quiet students who moved through the hallways without drawing attention, the kind of student who was easy to overlook in a large school. But her musical voice was impossible to ignore. As the composition reached its climactic section, Mrs. Rodriguez felt tears forming in her eyes. The music spoke of pain and resilience in ways that were both universal and deeply personal. It was the kind of raw, honest expression that most musicians spent years learning to achieve, if they ever achieved it at all. When the piece finally ended, the silence in the room was profound. Maya sat with her hand still resting on the keys, letting the final notes fade away completely before she opened her eyes. The rain continued its steady pattern against the windows, bringing her gradually back to the present moment. That's when she saw the figure standing in the doorway. Maya's heart stopped for a moment as she recognized Mrs. Rodriguez, the music teacher she had seen in the hallways but never spoken to. The woman's face was wet with tears, her expression a mixture of amazement and something that looked like recognition. "How long have you been playing?" Mrs. Rodriguez asked gently, stepping into the room and closing the door softly behind her. Maya's first instinct was to run. Her secret sanctuary had been discovered, and all the fears she had been pushing away came flooding back. She stood up from the piano bench quickly, her mind racing through possible explanations or excuses. "I'm sorry," Maya stammered. "I didn't think anyone would mind. I wasn't supposed to be here during lunch, I know. I can leave, I won't come back." "Wait," Mrs. Rodriguez said, raising a gentle hand. "Please don't apologize. That was extraordinary. I've never heard anything like it. How long have you been studying piano?" Maya looked down at her hands, then back at the teacher who was waiting patiently for an answer. The moment stretched between them, full of possibility and fear. Everything in Maya's experience told her to lie, to deflect, to protect herself with the carefully constructed barriers she had built around her life. But something in Mrs. Rodriguez's voice, the genuine wonder and respect in her expression, made Maya pause. For the first time in months, she was face to face with someone who had heard her real voice, her truest self expressed through music. "I haven't been studying," Maya said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I taught myself. I've been coming here during lunch for about 3 months. Mrs. Rodriguez's eyes widened in disbelief. "You taught yourself? All of that was self-taught?" Maya nodded, still ready to flee if the questions became too personal or if the teacher seemed upset about her unauthorized use of the music room. "That piece you were just playing," Mrs. Rodriguez continued. "Did you compose it yourself?" Again, Maya nodded. The admission felt both terrifying and liberating. She had never shared her music with anyone, had never even spoken about it out loud. Mrs. Rodriguez walked slowly toward the piano, as if approaching something sacred. She looked at the keys that had just produced such beautiful music, then back at Maya with an expression of pure amazement. "Do you realize how extraordinary this is?" she asked. "Most of my students who have been taking lessons for years couldn't play with the emotional depth and musical understanding you just demonstrated. And you've never had formal training?" Maya shook her head, still uncertain about where this conversation was leading. She had spent so long being invisible that being truly seen felt overwhelming and vulnerable. "Would you play something else for me?" Mrs. Rodriguez asked. "I'd love to hear more of your compositions." The request hung in the air between them. Maya looked at the piano, then at the teacher who was watching her with such genuine interest and respect. For 3 months she had been creating music in solitude, never imagining that anyone else would hear it or understand it. But Mrs. Rodriguez had not only heard it, she had been moved by it. Someone had listened to Maya's musical voice and recognized its value. Slowly, Maya sat back down at the piano bench. She placed her hands on the keys and began to play one of her earlier compositions, a piece inspired by her morning walks with Kai to his elementary school. The melody was gentle and hopeful, capturing the way her little brother's hand felt in hers and his endless questions about the world around them. As she played, Maya felt the walls she had built around herself beginning to shift. For the first time in years, someone was seeing her not as a problem to be solved or a secret to be kept, but as an artist with something valuable to share. Mrs. Rodriguez listened with the same attention and respect she would give to a professional performance, recognizing that she was witnessing something special, something that would change both of their lives in ways neither of them could yet imagine. In the week following her discovery by Mrs. Rodriguez, Maya felt like she was living in two different worlds. During her classes, she maintained her usual invisible presence, sitting quietly and avoiding attention. But during lunch periods, she found herself having conversations about music with someone who truly understood her gift. Mrs. Rodriguez had asked Maya to continue their sessions in the music room, not as punishment or obligation, but as mentorship. The teacher brought sheet music from famous composers, showing Maya how her intuitive understanding compared to classical techniques. She was amazed to discover that Maya had independently developed sophisticated musical concepts that many trained musicians struggled with. "You have perfect pitch," Mrs. Rodriguez explained one day, playing random notes and watching Maya identify them instantly. "And your understanding of harmony is remarkable. You're creating chord progressions that shouldn't work theoretically, but they're beautiful because you're following your ear instead of rules." Maya absorbed these conversations like someone dying of thirst finally finding water. She had never realized that her musical instincts had names, that what she was doing connected to centuries of musical tradition and innovation. But it was on a Friday afternoon that Mrs. Rodriguez brought up the subject Maya had been dreading. "The spring talent show is coming up in 6 weeks," the teacher said casually while Maya was working. "Through a new composition. I think you should perform." Maya's hands froze on the keys. The idea of playing in front of an audience, of being seen and judged by her classmates, filled her with panic. Her music was private, personal, something that belonged to the safety of this empty room. "I can't," Maya said immediately. "I don't perform. I just play for myself." Mrs. Rodriguez was quiet for a moment, then sat down beside Maya on the piano bench. "Can I tell you something? In 15 years of teaching, I've never encountered raw talent like yours. Your music doesn't just sound good, it communicates something important. It tells stories that people need to hear. But what if I mess up? What if people don't understand it? What if they think it's weird or sad?" "Maya," Mrs. Rodriguez said gently, "art isn't about being perfect. It's about being honest. And your music is more honest than anything I've heard in years." Despite the teacher's encouragement, Maya refused to consider the talent show. The thought of stepping out of her carefully maintained invisibility felt impossible. She had spent so long protecting herself and her family's secrets that the idea of voluntary exposure seemed dangerous. For the next 2 weeks, Mrs. Rodriguez continued to mention the talent show, but Maya's answer remained firm. She would keep playing during lunch, would continue learning and developing her skills, but she would not perform publicly. Then everything changed on a Tuesday morning when Mrs. Rodriguez arrived at school with devastating news. Christina moved to Arizona over the weekend. She announced to Maya during their lunch session. Christina had been the school's star performer, a senior who had been studying piano since childhood and was scheduled to be the headline act for the upcoming District Arts Showcase. "The showcase is next Friday," Mrs. Rodriguez continued, her voice heavy with disappointment. "It's a huge event with students from 12 schools and representatives from several music colleges. Christina was supposed to represent our school, and now we have nobody." Maya felt sorry for her teacher, but she didn't understand why this information was being shared with her until Mrs. Rodriguez turned to face her directly. "I know you said no to the talent show, but this is different. This isn't about performing for your classmates. This would be at the district auditorium, mostly strangers from other schools. You'd be representing not just yourself, but the musical potential of Lincoln High School. Mrs. Rodriguez, I appreciate everything you've done for me, but I really can't. I'm not ready for something like that." The teacher was quiet for a long moment, then spoke with careful precision. "Maya, can I ask you something personal? Are you planning to go to college?" The question hit Maya like a physical blow. College was something other kids talked about. Kids whose families had money and stability and the luxury of planning for the future. Maya's life was focused on getting through each day, each week, making sure Kai was cared for and their family stayed together. "I don't think college is really an option for me," Maya said quietly. Mrs. Rodriguez pulled a folder from her bag and set it on the piano. "These are scholarship applications from 5 different universities with excellent music programs. Full scholarships, Maya, Room, board, tuition, everything covered for students with exceptional talent who demonstrate financial need. Maya stared at the folder as if it contained something dangerous. I couldn't qualify for those. They're for real musicians, people who have been training their whole lives. You are a real musician, Mrs. Rodriguez said firmly. And these scholarships aren't just about technical skill. They're looking for students with original voices, with something unique to contribute to their programs. Your musical intuition and composition ability would make you a standout candidate at any of these schools. She opened the folder and showed Maya photographs of beautiful college campuses, descriptions of music programs with recording studios and concert halls, professors who were respected performers and composers. But here's the thing, Mrs. Rodriguez continued. All of these applications require a live audition or a recording of a live performance, and the application deadlines are next month. Maya felt the walls closing in around her. The scholarships represented possibilities she had never dared to imagine, but they required her to do the one thing that terrified her most: perform publicly. If you performed at the district showcase next Friday, I could arrange for several college representatives to attend. You could audition for multiple programs in one night, without having to travel or arrange separate auditions. The silence stretched between them while Maya processed this information. On one hand, Mrs. Rodriguez was offering her a path to a future she had never thought possible, an escape from the cycle of poverty and struggle that had defined her family for generations. On the other hand, performing publicly meant exposure, questions, attention that could unravel the carefully constructed privacy that protected her family's secrets. I need to think about it, Maya said finally. That night, Maya sat at her grandmother's kitchen table, staring at the scholarship applications Mrs. Rodriguez had given her to take home. Around her, the apartment was quiet except for the sound of Kai breathing softly in their shared bedroom and the distant hum of traffic outside. She read through the scholarship descriptions, imagining what it would be like to study music in a place where her talent was valued and developed, where she could learn from professors who understood the power of musical expression. But then she thought about Kai, about her grandmother working 3 jobs, about the responsibilities that kept her family functioning. How could she leave when so many people depended on her? Maya picked up a pen and began writing in the margins of the applications, not answers to the questions they asked, but a composition. The melody that emerged on paper was complex and conflicted, full of yearning and fear, hope and obligation. She was writing the soundtrack to the most difficult decision of her life, knowing that whatever she chose would change everything, not just for herself, but for everyone she loved. The scholarship applications lay before her like doorways to different futures, and Maya had less than a week to decide whether she was brave enough to walk through one of them. Maya spent 3 sleepless nights wrestling with her decision. She would lie in bed listening to Kai's peaceful breathing, thinking about the scholarship applications hidden in her backpack and the performance opportunity that could change her life forever. On Wednesday morning, she found Mrs. Rodriguez waiting by her locker before first period. "I'll do it," Maya said quietly before the teacher could even speak. "I'll perform at the showcase." Mrs. Rodriguez's face lit up with a mixture of relief and excitement. "Maya, that's wonderful. But are you sure? I don't want you to feel pressured." "I'm terrified," Maya admitted. "But I keep thinking about my grandmother working 3 jobs and Kai's future. And maybe this is my chance to build something better for all of us." The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation. Mrs. Rodriguez helped Maya select one of her original compositions for the performance, a piece that had evolved over several weeks of lunch sessions. It was the story of her family told through music, beginning with gentle melodies that represented her childhood memories, building through complex harmonies that captured the challenges they faced, and ending with hopeful resolution that spoke of resilience and love. "This piece is perfect," Mrs. Rodriguez said as Maya played it through for the final time during practice. "It showcases not just your technical ability, but your gift for storytelling through music. The college representatives are going to be amazed." Friday evening arrived with the weight of destiny. Maya stood in the wings of the district auditorium, wearing a simple black dress that Mrs. Rodriguez had helped her find at a thrift store. The dress was elegant in its simplicity, and Maya felt both more grown-up and more vulnerable than she ever had before. Through the curtains, she could see the auditorium filling with people, Students from 12 different schools, teachers, parents, and the college representatives who held her future in their hands. The audience was larger than anything Maya had ever imagined, and the reality of what she was about to do hit her like a wave. "I can't do this," she whispered to Mrs. Rodriguez, who was staying close to provide support. "There are too many people. What if I forget the music? What if my hands shake too much to play?" Mrs. Rodriguez placed gentle hands on Maya's shoulders. "Look at me," she said firmly. "You're not playing for them. You're playing for yourself, for your family, for every person who has ever felt invisible or unheard. Your music has the power to touch hearts and change minds. Trust in that power." The student before Maya finished his performance to polite applause, and suddenly it was time. Maya walked onto the stage on unsteady legs, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure the audience could hear it. The stage lights were blindingly bright, making it impossible to see individual faces in the audience. In a strange way, this helped. Maya could pretend she was back in the music room, alone with her thoughts and the piano that had become her closest friend. She sat down at the beautiful grand piano, so different from the old upright she was used to. The keys felt smooth and responsive under her fingers as she adjusted the bench and tried to calm her racing heart. For a moment, Maya closed her eyes and thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. She thought about all the mornings she had woken up at 5 a.m. to take care of Kai, all the nights she had fallen asleep over homework, all the times she had felt invisible and unimportant. But she also thought about the first time she had touched piano keys, the discovery that her hands could create beauty in a world that often felt harsh. She thought about the music that had helped her process emotions too complex for words, and the hope that had grown inside her with each composition. Maya placed her hands on the keys and began to play. The opening notes were soft and tentative, like a child's first steps. The melody spoke of innocence and wonder, of a time when the world felt safe and full of possibilities. As she played, Maya felt her nervousness begin to transform into something else: determination. The music grew more complex as it progressed, with her left hand providing steady, grounding rhythms while her right hand wove melodies that told stories of challenge and growth. She played about learning to be strong when strength was required, about finding beauty in unexpected places, about the love that holds families together even in difficult times. Halfway through the piece, Maya reached the section that had always been the most emotionally challenging for her to play. These were the notes that represented her mother's struggles with addiction, the fear and sadness and complicated love that came with watching someone you care about battle their own demons. Instead of shying away from these difficult emotions, Maya leaned into them. Her fingers found chords that spoke of heartbreak and hope existing side by side, of the way love persists even when it's painful. The music became a prayer, a lament, and a celebration all at once. As she played this section, Maya became aware that the auditorium had fallen completely silent. She couldn't see the audience, but she could feel their attention, their emotional engagement with the story she was telling through music. The final section of her composition was the most hopeful, speaking of dreams that survive despite obstacles, of the strength that comes from caring for others, of the possibility that beauty can emerge from even the most challenging circumstances. Maya's hands moved across the keys with growing confidence, building to a conclusion that was both peaceful and triumphant. When the final note faded away, the silence in the auditorium seemed to stretch forever. Maya sat with her hands still resting on the keys, afraid to look up, afraid to break the spell that the music had created. Then the applause began. It started slowly, with one person clapping, then another. Then suddenly the entire auditorium erupted in the loudest, most sustained applause Maya had ever heard. People were standing, some wiping tears from their eyes, others calling out encouragement. Maya finally looked up from the piano to see an audience on their feet, their faces showing the same wonder and respect that Mrs. Rodriguez had shown that first day in the music room. These strangers had heard her story, had understood the emotions she had poured into her music, and they were responding with appreciation and recognition. For 8 minutes, Maya had shared her deepest self with a room full of people, and instead of judgment or pity, she had received understanding and admiration. As she stood up from the piano bench and took a small bow, Maya realized that her life had just changed forever. She was no longer the invisible girl hiding in the corner of the cafeteria. She was a musician, an artist, someone whose voice mattered and whose story had the power to move others. The college representatives in the audience were already making notes, recognizing that they had just witnessed something extraordinary. But even more important than their professional interest was the knowledge that Maya had found her courage, had stepped out of the shadows and claimed her place in the world. Walking off the stage to continued applause, Maya felt like she was floating. Mrs. Rodriguez met her in the wings with tears of pride and joy, but Maya barely heard her congratulations. She was still processing the magnitude of what had just happened, the way music had transformed not just her own life, but had created a moment of connection and understanding with hundreds of strangers. For the first time in her life, Maya understood what it meant to be truly seen and appreciated for who she really was. The invisible girl had found her voice, and it was more powerful than she had ever dared to imagine. The standing ovation seemed to last forever, but for Maya, time had taken on a dreamlike quality. She stood in the wings of the auditorium, still processing what had just happened, when Mrs. Rodriguez approached with a huge smile and tears streaming down her face. "Maya, that was incredible," her teacher said, pulling her into a warm hug. "I've never seen an audience respond like that to a student performance. You moved every single person in that auditorium." Before Maya could fully respond, people began approaching her backstage. First came the college representatives, professional musicians and educators who had traveled from universities across the state to scout talent for their programs. Dr. Williams from the State University music program was the first to introduce himself. "Young lady, that was one of the most emotionally powerful performances I've witnessed in 20 years of attending student showcases. Your composition skills are remarkable, and your ability to convey emotion through music is truly exceptional." Maya felt overwhelmed as more representatives gathered around her, each offering scholarship opportunities and expressing amazement at her self-taught abilities. They handed her business cards and program brochures, talking about recording studios and master classes and opportunities she had never dreamed possible. The full scholarship would cover everything, explained Professor Martinez from the conservatory program. "Tuition, room and board, even a stipend for music supplies. We're looking for students with your kind of natural talent and original voice." As the conversations continued, Maya became aware of a commotion near the auditorium entrance. She looked over to see her grandmother and Kai making their way through the crowd, both looking slightly overwhelmed by the formal setting but determined to reach her. Mrs. Rodriguez had secretly contacted Maya's grandmother that morning, inviting the family to attend the showcase. She had arranged for them to have reserved seats and had even provided directions and parking information. When Kai spotted Maya, he broke away from their grandmother and ran toward her, his face glowing with excitement and pride. "Maya, you were amazing. I didn't know you could play piano like that." Maya knelt down to hug her little brother, feeling tears start to form in her eyes. Having her family there to witness this moment made everything feel more real and meaningful. Her grandmother approached more slowly, her weathered hands clasped in front of her, and her eyes bright with unshed tears. When she reached Maya, she cupped her granddaughter's face in her hands and spoke in a voice thick with emotion. "Mija, we always knew you were special. But tonight the whole world knows too. Your music, it spoke to my heart. It told our story, but it also told everyone that we are strong, that we are beautiful, that we matter." The college representatives stepped back respectfully, recognizing the importance of this family moment. Maya hugged her grandmother tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of the lavender soap she had used for as long as Maya could remember. "I was so scared, Abuela," Maya whispered. "I thought maybe I was fooling myself about the music." "Fear is normal, mija," her grandmother replied. "But courage is doing what matters even when you're afraid. Tonight you showed courage, and you showed the world who you really are." Over the following weeks, Maya's life transformed in ways she could never have anticipated. Her performance had been recorded by the district, and the video began circulating online, gathering thousands of views and comments from people moved by her story and her music. Local newspapers wrote articles about the self-taught pianist from Lincoln High School who had impressed college recruiters with her original compositions. Music teachers from other schools reached out to Mrs. Rodriguez, asking about Maya's background and training methods. But the most meaningful changes were happening at school. Maya found herself in the unusual position of being recognized and approached by classmates who had never noticed her before. Instead of feeling overwhelmed by the attention, she discovered that visibility didn't have to mean vulnerability. She began tutoring other students who were interested in music, sharing the piano skills she had developed and helping them find their own musical voices. Teaching others helped Maya process her own journey and gave her a way to give back to the school community that had unknowingly provided her with the sanctuary where her talent flourished. The scholarship offers had been everything Mrs. Rodriguez had promised. Maya ultimately chose the State University program, which offered not only a full scholarship but also opportunities to continue composing original music and working with other students who shared her passion for musical storytelling. The decision to leave for college had been difficult, requiring long conversations with her grandmother about Kai's care and the family's financial situation. But her grandmother had been adamant that Maya should pursue this opportunity. "This is not just for you, Mija," she had said during one of their late-night talks. "This is for all of us, for our future, for Kai's future. You will learn and grow, and then you will come back and help lift up our whole community." Maya's mother had even made an appearance during the college planning discussions, showing up for a rare family meeting and expressing pride in her daughter's achievements. It was a complicated conversation, full of apologies and promises that Maya had heard before, but there was something different in her mother's eyes, a recognition of how much Maya had accomplished despite the challenges at home. As Maya's senior year progressed, she continued her daily lunch sessions in the music room, but now she was often joined by other students who wanted to learn from her or simply listen to her play. The music room became a gathering place for kids who felt like outsiders, who found comfort in Maya's accepting presence and the beauty of the music she created. Mrs. Rodriguez watched these developments with deep satisfaction, knowing that Maya's influence was extending far beyond her own musical development. She was becoming a mentor and inspiration to others, showing them that talent could emerge from unexpected places and that creativity could flourish even in difficult circumstances. On graduation day, Maya performed at the ceremony, playing a new composition she had written specifically for the occasion. The piece celebrated the journey from uncertainty to possibility, acknowledging the struggles that many students faced while emphasizing the hope that education and self-discovery could provide. As she played the final notes of her high school career, Maya looked out at the audience and saw faces that represented all the different aspects of her life. Her family sat in the front row, beaming with pride. Mrs. Rodriguez stood nearby, tears of joy in her eyes. Classmates who had never spoken to her before were applauding with genuine enthusiasm. But perhaps most importantly, Maya saw younger students in the audience, kids who might be carrying their own invisible burdens, who might feel unseen and unheard in their daily lives. She hoped that her story would inspire them to find their own voices, their own ways of creating beauty and meaning in the world. After the ceremony, as Maya packed up her few belongings from her locker, she took one last walk through the school hallways. She stopped by the music room where it all began and sat down at the old upright piano one final time. The melody that emerged was a thank you note written in music, expressing gratitude for the sanctuary this room had provided, for the teacher who had believed in her potential, and for the journey that had led her from invisibility to recognition. As she played, Maya reflected on how much had changed since that first detention day, when she had wandered into this room by accident. She had discovered not just musical talent, but courage, voice, and a sense of purpose that would guide her into her future. When she finished playing, Maya closed the piano lid gently and whispered a promise to the empty room. She would take everything she had learned here and use it to create more music, to tell more stories, and to help other young people find their own hidden talents and courage. The invisible girl had found her voice, and she was ready to use it to change the world. One note at a time. Walking out of Lincoln High School for the last time, Maya carried with her not just memories and achievements, but a deep understanding that everyone has the potential for greatness, even when they can't see it themselves. Sometimes all it takes is the right moment, the right opportunity, and the courage to let your true self shine through. Her story was proof that talent can emerge from the most unexpected places, that hardship can become the source of beautiful art, and that being invisible doesn't mean being insignificant. Sometimes the quietest voices, when finally heard, have the power to move mountains.